All right. So last night, the Yankees clinched a playoff berth. Today, they fell victim to a 3-2 loss against a team that needs these wins more than anything in the world. And you saw
Apparently they were drunk.
Yeah, that too. I've heard. Apparently, this was they did all they could. The Mariners did all they could against the drunk Yankees.
Yes.
So,
and can we get this out of the way, by the way, before you introduce this show?
Absolutely.
Gary Sheffield Jr. is on AirPods. We know the audio is not his typical red SM7B. It's not working. There you go. So if you want to know why the audio sounds like I'm in a tunnel, there you go. Nothing we can do about it. Thank you very much.
Like that. I actually thought you were going a different route, but that makes a lot of sense. The different route I thought you were going in is what we talked about off air. I do not care, and call me crazy for feeling this way. I do not care what anyone says about them being hungover. Their job as professional athletes, and I'm not trying to go boomer on you, but their job as professional athletes is to get out there, make sure they're prepared, and win the damn ball game. There's plenty of time left in the year. No one is going to feel sorry for you. Definitely no one's going to feel sorry for you after you clinched a playoff spot. So if that happened, if it didn't happen, Gary, I don't give a crap. Okay, I do not care.
3 or 4 Tecate lights and they can't go play a baseball game after. I mean, it's not like they were doing shots of Hennessy, right?
Maybe they were. Who knows?
I guess so, but it's like based on what they were showing us, it's like a few beers.
Oh well,
and you mean to tell me that's an excuse? Mickey Mantle. Remember the stories they used to tell us about Mickey Mantle? This dude, he used to just get plastered, then show up the next day and hit 3 homers. So if Mickey Mantle could do it, we can do it.
Yeah, without all of the incredible technology and these bats now, and like I mean, you just go up there and grab like a stick, literally a stick. I mean, the bats were not anywhere near as good as they are now.
No, dude,
and we go up there, no batting gloves, none of that, no arm guards, nothing. He just go up there, put his elbow up like that, boom, and just smack it. No, again, all jokes aside, I think there's a possibility they were hungover, but do I? Well, yes, it could have affected the game. Am I going to use that as an excuse? Absolutely not. So we're moving on. Juan Soto could use that as an excuse as to why he ran into a wall. So you could say, yeah, I was hungover. He's not going to say that, but I guess maybe the hungover excuse applies there. Jake Cousins must have drank too much because he has pec tightness now. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully he's okay. He says he's okay. Juan Soto says he's okay. We'll see what the MRI says tomorrow. That might say something different.
I mean, I can't remember if Aaron Judge told us he was okay when he ran into the fence, but the Yankees tend to tell us they're always okay. And then we just find out in hindsight what happened. Right. So
Jazz is like, I'll play tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, 10-day IL. I'm like, what?
Exactly. So we don't really know what's happening with Juan Soto. And if you thought you were going to come to this podcast and we were going to unveil that, listen, guys, we have we have a lack of information the same way you guys do. And we're willing to share that. We have no clue. Tomorrow they could tell us that Juan Soto will never play again. Right. We have no clue.
I hope they don't tell us that.
Right. So we're just going to hope for the best. We'll find out in the morning. If you don't see Juan Soto in the lineup, I know they're going to tell us not to panic. We're going to panic. But I digress. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, Jazz Chisholm Jr. hit a home run. Hungover home run. How about that? Man's just letting it rip. And then Jason Dominguez, he's hitting 2 for 4. Not really fielding, though. He looked hungover in the field, having the ball go right off his glove. And then the day before, he must have been hungover the day before because the ball just landed and he didn't see it. So we're, talking about that. And then I thought Schmidt looked good, man. For being hungover, Schmidt really looked good on the mound. I'm done with that. I'm sorry. It's funny, but Schmidt looked good on the mound. All jokes aside, he's got great stuff. This is somebody that we brought up yesterday as a guy that I thought I was really confident in because when you go back and you look, the worst game he's had this year, he's given up 3 runs. He has not given up more than 3 runs in a game. And Gary, boy, oh boy, did I start to wonder, did I jinx him today? Because it looked like I might have. No, I didn't jinx the defense either. The defense is going to defense, right? Or not defense, for lack of a better term.
Don't get mad at us. Jake and I aren't fielding a damn thing. We're not doing anything. So,
and I don't believe in any of that superstition bullshit. So,
oh, you don't?
I don't. I'm not one of those people that's like, I didn't wear my Yankee jersey and they lost, so now I'm going to blame it on myself all the way in upstate New York while they're in Seattle. No, that's not at all.
Yeah, like I
ever
can't
going
get
to
out the
happen.
car. So the way I do it is
Yeah.
when I get out of my car, I change the volume to a different volume getting out of the car. And if let's just say right now I'm on the number 10, right? Because that's exactly where I'm at. And I'll get out the car, put it at 10, and I'll walk away. Lock the car, go inside. If the Yankees lose, tomorrow's number is 11, right? So I dial it to 11. And I will do that every single day until the Yankees go on a win streak. And as soon as they lose, I put on a different volume. So I'm highly superstitious, but I will tell you, we've got hardly anything to do. We're not on the team. Jake and I aren't in left field. Like we're not in right field. We're not fielding ground balls at third base. We've really got nothing to do with what the Yankees do out there. We just cover this team. So yeah, it's unfortunate, right, that we didn't play quality defense. It's something that you would hope would be there in mid to late September. But I will say this about Jason Dominguez. This is something that's really important to me. For the love of God, can we care a little bit more about the bat as opposed to the glove and the arm, right?
Absolutely.
For these prospects, you got to hit the ball to be a top prospect. Jason Dominguez is finally hitting the ground running. This is a good thing. He hasn't had much time. Obviously, he was very good last year in his short stint. But if this guy's hitting, he's hidden at the bottom of the lineup, and the Yankees are dangerous. So I know you couldn't tell today, but Jason Dominguez is on his way.
Did you have any loaded narrative there when you said, wow, I want my prospect to be hitting, not necessarily fielding? There wasn't anybody you had in
Anthony
mind
Volpe
there.
had a hit today. So there was no hidden narrative. He didn't hit a double. I know he hasn't hit for extra bases in about a month, but no hidden narrative there.
Okay, so he hasn't hit for extra bases since Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out last year, but all jokes aside.
We don't know exactly, because I was trying to fish for the last time Anthony Volpe had an extra base hit. As of now, bare minimum, I know it's 16 games because that's what Baseball Reference told me. But I will say this, as of now, Anthony Volpe is behind the 8 ball offensively. But defensively, in today's game in the 8th inning, he made a really nice play to his left, sliding to his left, made a nice throw over to Rizzo. That's huge. That's exactly what I need to see. And is that enough from a top prospect? Absolutely not. But I will tell you this, if you're not going to hit, you damn sure better be making plays like that. So props to Anthony Volpe for doing that.
Yeah, so we have a fun show for you guys today. A little shorter, or at least we're hoping to be on the shorter side because they lost. We don't want to keep you too long. Gary sounds like he's talking out of a tin can. So,
Shout out kidding. Steve Jobs.
I don't understand how they don't have a better microphone. I don't get it. Everyone uses those. I don't know. But with that said, we had some really good mailbags that I want to give a shout out to. And to the shock of nobody, it comes from Ed W. and Jalen Sestero, who have been very active in the mailbag community. If you want to get in on that, be sure to be a member. If you haven't already signed up as a member, definitely do that. Sign up as a member, join at the field level. Literally, field level is one of our memberships. And you'll have access to mailbags. And we're working on some other stuff and figuring it all out. Before we dive into all that, though, just want to let you guys know and remind you guys, first off, like, subscribe, comment, do all that. Rate, review wherever you're listening. Maybe you're listening to this on a podcast right now. Go and make sure that you're reviewing that. 5-star review helps us out. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast there. You can find us on all podcast platforms, Yankees Unloaded. Just search it, and you don't have to search it. It's literally in the description below. In addition to that, I mentioned memberships. What I didn't mention is Discord. Our Discord has 69 members. So we are growing on there. Nice, exactly. So check it out. Link is in the description, the comments section below. If you're wanting to be sold on this, first off, it's free. You like free shit, right? Second, while it's free, it's also a 24/7 Yankees chat. Like at any point, if you're like, I really want this question answered. I want to talk to a bunch of Yankees fans that have like-minded ideas. Well, there you go. So check it out. Link is in the comment section and description below. In addition to that, field level shout outs go to Juan Cepeda, Kid from LI, Carlos Marrero, Jeff J, Ed W, Brian Fuchs, Ryan Hoffman, Rich Squires, Joshua Halleckman, Egyptian Magician, Nick Gomes, Jalen Sestero, JT Roberts, Mickey G, and Ronnie. And we appreciate all of you guys. We appreciate our second deck members as well. And we appreciate our viewers and subscribers. Now for the mailbag, because we already had kind of a plan yesterday. We were talking off air about defensive run saved and defensive WAR. We'll get to that. But first off, to set the table, Ed W, the birdie conversation got me thinking about the two cuts are going to be made for the 26-man roster. Unless I have this wrong, I'm going to sound totally stupid. Leiter seems obvious, but to keep Cabrera, Birdie, and Dominguez, you'll have to shed a pitcher. So maybe Meza, but then you're down to Hill as the only pure lefty reliever, not counting Rodon, assuming they don't start him. Interested to hear what you all think about this. So Gary, this is interesting because, you and I talked about this off air, and we prepared, I guess, a 26-man roster. I feel like this was going to be way more of an intriguing conversation to have 2 weeks ago, and now it just feels cut and dry. It doesn't feel like there's anybody that, really is going to be tough. Like, oh, they're on the outside looking in. Hopefully they make it. This kind of feels like the postseason roster, maybe a little bit, changing. But Gary, what say you? What were your thoughts on this question from Ed?
Well, believe it or not, you were just saying, is there a player that we hope is on the roster but might not be? I would probably say it's safe to say there's going to be a player that we hope's not on the roster that will be on the roster. And that player's name is Mark Leiter Jr. Now, we don't make the rosters. We don't really have any influence on what happens with these rosters. But I will tell you, Mark Leiter Jr. has done absolutely nothing on the field in pinstripes to earn a spot in October. That's just the way it is. Now, he was a pretty decent pitcher in Chicago. We know what the numbers say. We made a whole video on it. We were rooting for it. It'd be good for this team. But that hasn't materialized. Just because you have a really good splitter analytically doesn't mean you're going to be an effective pitcher, especially as we move on to October. So, Jake, here I am. The question, do we grab an extra bat, right, an extra couple bats, or do we lean on adding some extra pitchers, right? Do we go that route? And I'm going to say this, and I hope people can understand what I'm trying to say here, is that the Yankees have a history of somewhat understanding which arms to go to, somewhat, okay? Especially in recent history. Clay Holmes, for example, except for the last day or so where he was utilized, the Yankees have started to make some sense of who they're going to. I have more trust in who the Yankees put on the mound than I do what they've done with their lineups. Everyone's moving around. You got Rizzo over there at first base. You got Bird over at first base. You got Cabrera, right? What are we doing at third base? Volpe plays every day, never comes off the field. In my opinion, the biggest problem with the Yankees is who's playing where in the field. Trevino is behind the plate, right? I believe the New York Yankees would be better if he just was on the field less. He can play every once in a while, but be on the field less. So in my opinion, putting more players on the bench for the Yankees just makes this whole circus show of who's playing that much more difficult for Aaron Boone. I want to reduce the offensive players, the offensive talent, so that we just have a clear understanding of who's playing and who's not.
I like that. I disagree with, that last part because I think I would rather have Boone have less options in the bullpen because I think he gets way too careless with that.
Right.
Aaron Boone, when he's got 11 dudes in the bullpen to utilize in one game, is going to be like that degenerate gambler that that's just like, nah, man, you got to get on this 12-leg parlay. Like, do you hear yourself right now? I don't have to get it on anything. That's ridiculous. Yeah. The reason I say 12-leg parlay, and I'll always use betting legs in a parlay as an example is because when you pitch 11 guys or whatever, and you don't have to pitch 11, you pitch 5, right? You might think, okay, we have Andrew Miller, we have Aroldis Chapman, we have Clay Holmes, we have Zach Britton, whoever, right? Betances. Right. You might think super bullpen, no one is going to hit us. But the reality is I don't look at it that way. I look at it from a logistics standpoint. Basically, what you're doing is creating more variables to blow the effing game. That's how I look at it. That's the only way I look at it. I don't care how good your bullpen guys are. I'm not even talking about the next game, which also begs the question, is that the right move? Because now they might not be ready for the next game. Now you don't have those guys. I am not a fan of just using the bullpen just because I can. I want games in the postseason have to matter. You can say, I mean, I already see this, Gary. I told you this off air. Garrett Cole goes 5 innings. He's got 70 pitches. And because it's the playoffs, Aaron Boone is like, you know, Garrett, I know you haven't given up a run. I know you've only given up 1 hit. But we're going to go to the bullpen here. We're going to put in Clay Holmes in the 5th inning or 6th inning.
So go more conservative because of the options.
But that's horrifying because first off, now you end up with Clay Holmes in the 6th inning. That sounds like a nightmare because he doesn't pitch well pretty much outside of the 8th. So you put Clay Holmes in the 6th, or God forbid you put Mark Leiter Jr. in there. And now the game, you just took it out of the most reliable guy in your rotation, most reliable pitcher you have. You took him out of a game where he was throwing 70 pitches. And I don't want to get Boone in trouble for something he hasn't done yet. But can you not see that? Can you not see a scenario where a Heel, a Cole, hell, even Rodon is pitching well, and somehow the pitch count has been managed, but Boone looks at it as, this is the playoffs. We can't treat this like a regular game. And Gary, you and I have talked about, we get it. We understand this is not a regular game, but doesn't mean you have to completely change your way of life just because it is a playoff game. If you're getting a good start out of your ace or your 2 or your 3, by all means, keep him in there. Unless he's showing signs of depleting and blowing the start, keep him out there. And that's my concern when you have, you decide to go the pitcher route and you have an extra pitcher. God forbid he has 14 pitchers. I am horrified of what we would see, truthfully, because
I'm horrified on both sides.
I get that.
We not be horrified. We just did essentially a platoon the whole year with our catcher. We clearly have one catcher's better than the other, right? We've also, to your point, have seen Clay Holmes go out and almost set a record for the New York Yankees, right? Insane work, especially given the fact we've existed since 1900. So having said that, both are a problem. It's which is worse. And I will tell you, to your point, it is worse taking a moderately tired Garrett Cole off the mound and then throwing even a comparable pitcher in Jake Cousins, then going Conley, then Weaver. As you said, you're bringing in other variables. The odds of all those pitchers being on their game that night, one of them's going to be off. Now you're just hoping the one that is off doesn't kill you that night. And that is partially why a lot of people who watch our show have always made the point. This is why starters have always been better off finding a way to get to the 7th inning. You go middle reliever, maybe you go setup man if you come out in the 6th inning, and you go closer. Very simple and concise. Some of the best teams in baseball, the Cleveland Guardians, really good example of this. They don't overcomplicate this. They don't have 12 guys touch the mound every night. They are trying to get to a setup man, and as soon as that setup man comes off the field, they immediately know it is time for Emmanuel Clase. Very simple decision-making at the end of games. The Yankees don't have simplicity at the end of games. It's a lot of mix and match. Actually, Jake, let's use Aaron Boone's quote. We are going to get creative. Well, I'm sorry. Being creative in October sounds like stress to me. And so to your point, yeah, adding more people in that room could potentially cause a problem. And I think that that's valid. It's a valid point to make that you're making. And I'm in a situation that I can see both sides of this. So I understand why you disagree.
Yeah, no, I get that. But, one thing that you said that I absolutely loved is you brought up the Guardians. And you just said they keep it simple. What if I told you the Guardians right now have a historic bullpen? Historic. One of the greatest of all time, statistically. That's not my opinion.
Helps to have the personnel, though. We will say that. To their defense, if we had Clase in the 9th inning, Boone would look a lot more comparable. That is at least true.
But if you use those guys the way Boone wants to use bullpen arms, there's a chance those guys wouldn't be anywhere near as effective with the Yankees. Truthfully, the same bullpen, even Clase could, if they're using Holmes like this, they might just drop dead if they saw Clase in their bullpen. They'd be like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I'm going to pitch him every night. Like, how?
Well, wait a minute. But why are we even maybe? Why is maybe in that sentence? We've actually seen it already. You mentioned the Super Bullpen. Did we not just dominate the regular season, win 110 games, go into the postseason, and then what happened? Everyone said, oh, the Super Bullpen pitching is going to win championships. What happened, guys? Oh, yeah, we were completely burnt out and tired. Why? Because we overutilized this bullpen. It's partially why we were talking about innings pitch out of our starting pitching this year. We wanted to protect guys like Holmes. Aaron Boone said, I don't want him pitching more than 70 times. There's a reason for that. It's his history. So to your point, no matter what the personnel looks like, if it's great, we overutilize it. If it's not so great, we tend to just throw the same guy out there over and over again. And now at the very end of the season, it took us till early September to finally admit, he didn't lose his job, but we're going to get creative. And now you're asking me as a podcaster every night, Jake, you as a podcaster every night, we're going to cover a team that is mixing and matching in October. It's going to be stressful.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do think the good news is it feels like Dreamweaver has taken over as the closer, because you can't be that dominant and just be like, we're going to go with Holmes again. Like, I don't think that's happening. I don't think that, but I mean, this is honestly what we're talking about with pitching and the analogy with betting. It's the best betting advice you could give to somebody. Like, yeah, it might sound great to have it go your way because you feel like this is the most valuable way, because it shows I'm Boone. I was able to use 6 pitchers. They all worked the way I wanted them to. They were dominant. And now I flex my arms because, I might not have those guys for tomorrow, but my plan worked, right? That's how people think.
It makes you look like Bruce Bochy is what it makes you look like.
And wouldn't you believe when you hit that 5-leg parlay, doesn't that make you feel really good when you hit that 5-leg parlay and you're looking at all that money that you just won? But
my friends send that to me all the time, and I just don't even reply because I just think they're idiots for doing parlays in the first place. So,
yeah. Well, this is the best betting advice for your friends. Do singles, do straight bets. And that, to me, straight bets are essentially what it is when you go the simplistic route. 7 innings pitched. If you could do it, perfect world. They pitch 7 innings. 8th inning, setup man. 9th inning, closer. Don't have to overcomplicate it. Mariano Rivera, John Wetland. Tom Gordon, Mariano Rivera. Not hard. Really not hard, right? Not everybody has Mariano Rivera. I get that. But when you start overcomplicating this thing, and you're like, lefty-righty matchup, and you're overblowing this 6 hitter because they're like, he's got good splits. Okay, well, he's hitting 189 right now. So I'm not exactly trying to bend over backwards for that guy. But
I agree.
Anyway, that's how I see it. We have Jalen Sestero's mailbag, which we kind of answered. Being that it seems we have a lot of pitching depth going into the playoff, would you consider taking maybe 11 to 12 pitchers and 14 to 15 position players? Or do you think 13 and 13 is the way to go? With more position players would allow us to ride the hot hand or even allow us to get struggling players out of the lineup. I love these questions today, guys. Great mailbag questions. Pretty much carried us throughout the show, if we're being honest here. We had some stuff going in, but that really helped.
No, we basically just had a bunch of hungover baseball players. They didn't show up, and we couldn't score against Seattle. So
I mean, what do you?
It was.
I love how we're just tough. They were hungover.
tough go at it. So, but the whole idea there, right? Are we going to be playing the hot hand or not.
Yeah.
I don't know if the amount of players that you have on your bench to your disposal, if that's going to change the whole idea of, yeah, we're just playing the hot hand, or are you just going to make up your mind in game 1? Yeah, in game 3, Stanton's going to play, and then in game 4, he won't, right? That's how the Yankees tend to operate in this way, right? That is the opposite of what that question's asking. Are we going to play the hot hand? The Yankees should always play the hot hand. Every baseball team in the league should play the hot hand unless that player is injured to the point that he cannot perform. That is absolutely okay to come off the field. This is sports, right? You have got to go out there and perform unless you are compromised. But the Yankees just don't do it this way. So I don't know if the amount of players that we've got on our bench is going to change what Aaron Boone does. We've seen over the course of the regular season, we've seen a healthy Trevino. We've seen a healthy Wells. And most of you would have concluded, okay, I know who the better player is. I don't even have to mention it. And yet Trevino came running out there on a Wednesday afternoon game. And we're sitting here on this show saying, I can see them doing this. We're saying that, and you guys understand that we are frustrated that the best player is not playing tomorrow. That is frustrating. But I will say, in Aaron Boone's defense, the chances in high-stakes pressure situations for him to go with matchups that are predetermined over the hot hand, I believe Aaron Boone will do the right thing. If he makes mistakes, I think it's going to be with that bullpen, like you said, Jake. That's something to worry about. So as far as the hot hand, I'm going to say that maybe the more realistic thing that they do, given the health, is they go with more position players, roll with the hot hands, and that's got to be enough. And if it's not, we're in for a long offseason.
I agree. Absolutely agree with that. I think, and we're going to get a little bit more into the thick of the hitters and the pitchers. I want to point two things out. First off, I want to ask you, just your personal opinion. We talked about Dave Roberts on this show. We've talked about how important pinch running is. And a lot of people would just say they got John Birdie, right? And John Birdie can fill that role. Well, if what you're saying right now, Jalen, with the struggling players and playing the hot hand, John Birdie, if they go that route, will be in the lineup. And now you don't have a pinch runner, really. You don't. So obviously you could make the argument, okay, Oswaldo Cabrera, but what about if Oswaldo Cabrera is one of the hot hand guys? Now he's playing. I think there's a chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen, Gary. I think there's a chance Trent Grisham misses this roster in favor of Duke Ellis. A lot of people aren't aware of this. Duke Ellis still resides on the 40-man roster right now. That is a fact. Duke Ellis is on the 40-man roster. In 2022, they kept Tim LeCastro. Why the hell would they do that? Pinch running. That's the only reason he would be there. So it might sound weird. Duke Ellis? Really? Yeah, I would love to see them use more of their minor league system. I'm sure they have plenty of guys. But they went out and they acquired Duke Ellis right around, I think it was the beginning of September. So they clearly looked at him as he could have a role. And it was nice for him to get his first hit and everything for the Yankees. But make no mistake about it, he's probably not even going to touch a bat in the postseason. Now that I say that, he'll probably end up being Aaron Boone, end up being a manager down the road.
They'll bring him in a Raul Ibanez situation.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine if Duke Ellis walks it off against the Astros in Game 7 to go to the World Series? He'll never have to pay for anything in his life. He'll be the manager in
2035 like Aaron Boone.
That's what I said. But do you see what I'm saying? I don't think that's something we didn't talk about that off air. And it's funny. I found this because I looked up their 40-man roster while we were doing this. He's the only guy aside from Vivas and Peraza and Rice, but he's the only outfielder that's on the 40-man roster that is not currently on this team. The reason I even looked this up, Gary, because I want to bring up something that I think needs to be discussed. Miguel Castro. You remember that name. He was on the Yankees 2022 postseason roster. He was on the ALCS roster because a lot of people don't know this. It's segmented. If you make the wild card, you have your 26 men. Then you can change up your 26 men roster in the next round and the next round and so forth. You also have emergency players in case anyone gets hurt. So they'll have those guys designated. But looking at Miguel Castro, this is a guy, right, in 2022 that did not pitch since July 10th. That was his last thing that he did. And then he comes in October 3rd in the last series against Texas last year, right? Not the playoffs, but against Texas, or 2022, excuse me. Mm-hmm. So 2022, he comes in, he pitches the 3rd, and he pitches the 5th. That's the end of that series. That's the end of the regular season. He only pitched 2 games to get himself ready for the postseason. I'm not saying I loved Miguel Castro on this roster, but he's somebody that they stashed almost the whole year, it felt like, on IL. So what are my initial thoughts when I think about that? I think about guys like, you talk about Lou Trevino. He's been mentioned by Aaron Boone. They like him. They like how he's progressed. Where is he? And I said off air, I'm like, well, I guess Lou Trevino won't be on this roster because, why would he? He hasn't pitched. Well, evidently the Yankees in 2022 didn't care about Miguel Castro. He pitched 2 games and they're like, yeah, we're good.
Well, so how did that work? Did that work out?
I don't know. I'm going to look that up, but I don't think it was
Miguel
amazing.
Castro for the Arizona Diamondbacks was an abomination. So
yeah,
let me say this. As far as pitching in the regular season and being stashed away, as you mentioned,
he did work out, by the way.
It did work out. Good. How did he
ALCS, pitch? 2 innings, 2 strikeouts, no hits, no runs.
Well, he pitched 2 innings. So
yeah, okay. But I mean, he was utilized against the Astros in the ALCS and was great essentially when asked.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just feel like it's a short sample size, and it's like if you pitch
for sure.
2 innings total, then like you hardly pitch. Which, to be fair, if Trevino comes out and he gives us 2 innings in a big series, and we happen to win that series, we're going to be very happy. But I will tell you this, Jake. Most people that you put on the field in a high-stakes situation, because that's what we're talking about here, relief pitching. Rarely ever does a reliever come in and no one's sweating. These are all high stakes. The 6th, the 7th, the 8th, doesn't matter what happens, right? It is high stakes. So my thing is that when you stash a player who wasn't healthy all year, unless this is a can't-miss talent, right, like Emmanuel Clase or Shane Bieber is out for the whole year, and then he gets healthy right at the end of the season, for the postseason, you decide we're going to pitch him in October. That makes a lot of sense to me. But when you're talking about a pitcher that doesn't have long-term success, I think that's a mistake using a postseason spot for a player that hasn't been healthy in the regular season. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know if there are control issues there. Remember what Clark Schmidt said. Clark Schmidt, you said, was our best pitcher this year, right? When he was healthy. We're not talking about that he gave us the best performance over the course of the season. He wasn't available. But when he was out there, he was the best arm. And what did he tell you after he got hurt? As soon as he came back, he said, I expected my command to be off. I did. And I was shocked to see where I was at. So a player of that caliber was surprised to see where his command was. And then suddenly this player who's been banged up all year long, trying to figure it out in the minor leagues, and now we're going to place that much trust in him in October baseball. In my opinion, I stay away from it. I understand why some people would say we need the arm. We didn't go get it in the deadline. Leiter Jr. wasn't that guy at the deadline. He's not that dude. Keep him off the roster. I'm all for it. But my issue is that this guy's not battle tested right now. And I just don't know if I throw a guy out on the battlefield when he hasn't been by my side all year.
No, I agree with that. It was more so bringing up a interesting viewpoint. Definitely thought-provoking because Miguel Castro pitched.
Yes.
Trevino hasn't pitched in 2 years. So it's not the same, but it's a similar concept where, I mean, like you have, 10 games left? Is Trevino going to get an opportunity in these next 10 games? That's when we're going to find out. But the same.
Do you think there's a chance?
I do. Definitely. There's definitely a chance.
Wow.
Because guess what's going to happen? Think about this. And by the way, that'd be a great story to root for. I would hope to death he would end up being great, right? Because that would be great. But the thing that needs to be said here is the Yankees could already start cutting down the roster. So people didn't realize this. This happened very like low key. Nick Birdie was eliminated from the postseason roster. They took him off. They DFA'd him and brought him back on AAA. Gonzalez, right? The pitcher who's just kind of been chilling in AAA. They got rid of him entirely. He's gone. They cut him. So those are guys that they're not activated. And guess what? Scott Efros, all that work, really bizarre the way they treated him after probably one of the outings he's had as a Yankee. They sent him down. They actually DFA'd Scott Efros. So now he is back on AAA. So the point I'm making here is that Nick Birdie and Scott Efros are eliminated. They are not on the 40-man roster. They are not in play. The only guys in play right now, if Brubaker comes off the IL, he has that option, right? Clayton Beeter, which is very intriguing because he's in the minors right now, right? He's back. Well, I didn't think he'd be back, and that's one of our guys, right? Clayton
that's
Beeter.
My dude. That's my dude right there.
Yeah. I think Scott Efros is on the 40-man roster, so scratch that. It was Nick Birdie, though, who's not. Yoendris Gomez is another, right? Then you have Ron Marinaccio. You have Cody Poteet, who would be more like Miguel Castro, and that he has
Marinaccio. We probably expect to be on the outside looking in. He just doesn't seem like a player that they're high on based on the way they're pulling the rug on this guy. Whether he performs well or not, I would say that he's been performing pretty poorly of late. Anytime he gets out on the field, but earlier in the season, Marinaccio actually pitched pretty well, and it didn't matter. They just sent him down anyway. We were wondering where he was at. So you can kind of read the tea leaves of how they treat guys. Do they just send them down immediately after a solid performance? Well, that probably tells you they don't have high plans for that guy in October.
Yeah, and I can tell you the last guy here, Trevino, I think is still in play. Okay. I think if we're being honest, Trevino, Poteet, and if I had to throw another one out there, I'm probably going to go with Clayton Beeter. Watch out for those three. One of those guys I would imagine is going to get called up between now and the rest of the year. And one of these guys, hopefully Mark Leiter Jr., is eliminated from the postseason roster. Nothing against him personally, but as a player, he's just not it. He's not what they were hoping for. And that's okay. If you DFA him, you can move him on in the AAA roster. Maybe you try to figure it out next year in spring training. But you can't tell me right now he's played his way onto the postseason roster.
Well, Brian, can we say this, though? Brian Cashman is absolutely hoping that Mark Leiter Jr. does something between September 20th and the beginning of postseason baseball, because nobody is pulling out the lotion faster for Mark Leiter Jr. pitching well in October faster than him. Nobody. There is not a soul, because what we all know as listeners of this podcast and as the two podcasters hosting the show, well, we know Brian Cashman loves himself to look in the mirror and say, I was right about that. Man, that really worked out. He loves doing this. And everybody knows this. This isn't anything personal. Yeah, this is how he does his business. He sometimes gets stuck in his ways, and very clearly there are moves that he does where he pulls more out of less, and he deserves applause for that. But there are a lot of decisions that Yankees fans can point to where he made a mistake. No harm, no foul. You made a mistake. Now you need to pivot from that mistake. Brian Cashman has shown an unwillingness to pivot quickly enough from his mistakes. Putting Leiter Jr. on the postseason roster, in my opinion, would just be circling back on a decision that you made in the past and hoping for something different than what reality actually says.
You can't morph reality into what you want it to be. Like, you can't just magically gaslight the entire fan base and be like, yeah, trust me, Mark Leiter Jr. is absolutely good enough to be on this roster. No, eventually the fans there'll be blowback, there'll be pushback, all of that. So yeah, an interesting storyline to monitor, and we'll wrap it up here talking about the postseason roster from a defensive standpoint, Gary.
Oh, this is interesting because there's narratives that people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So Jose Trevino in 2022 had one of the craziest defensive runs saved I've ever seen, 21.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you are a Platinum Glove winner. And he won the Platinum Glove that year for good reason. He was fantastic. The bat, more of a first half guy, but the glove, the whole year. So you got to give him his praise. However, this year is a 5 defensive runs saved. It's the lowest he's had since he was on Texas. So maybe you could say Trevino at one point, before he got hurt, because I do think injuries caught up with him, before he got really hurt, Trevino had an arm. Trevino had the glove. Trevino was great. He was arguably the most important defensive catcher in the league. I mean, the platinum glove kind of shows that. Now you fast forward to 2024. Reality hits. Trevino has a 5 DRS. Do you know what Wells has, Gary? He's got a 13. So
what are we actually saying here?
8 more defensive runs saved.
Everything. Is he better at everything?
Yeah, there's not one thing. Like maybe you could say framing, but Wells isn't far behind. He's still top 5 in framing. And I also don't care about framing as much as the next person. I mean, I guess when you have Rodon on the mound, you kind of have to frame. But for the most part, a lot of these guys can stay around the strike zone. You're stealing at bats, you're stealing pitches, even, without the framing, because guys like Clark Schmidt know how to manipulate the corners. And I just think if you see Jose Trevino in the playoffs, I won't be shocked. Is Wells going to play every single day? I think for the sake of keeping him somewhat fresh, I think Boone going into this is like, Jose Trevino is a major league catcher. I should be able to use him, just like they were able to use Higashioka in 2022. And then you're not just using Trevino every single day. But Wells should play 95 or more % of games. He is a contributor. He's not a catcher. He's not a guy that you just threw in at catcher because you had to. He's one of the best catchers in baseball. He is an asset, and the Yankees need to treat him as such.
Yeah, totally agree. Did you hear what you just said about keeping Austin Wells fresh, which I thought was a good point, right? The Yankees want to keep their catcher fresh so that he can have fresh legs throughout an extended postseason run, hopefully to win the World Series. But let's go back to the last time we won a World Series. If I stopped Hideki Matsui, Alex Rodriguez, if I talked to Derek Jeter on a golf course or Robinson Cano, do you think if I actually asked them, how fresh were you? Okay. Game 6, ground ball to second base, ground ball to Cano, and the Yankees are back on top. How'd your body feel? Did you feel fresh? Because you played every day. I watched the games. Most of the players who are out there on the field, they played every single day, right? Some old, some, right? Some of those guys were veterans. Some of them were young players. We had a mix on that roster. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that you're not going to be fresh in October, especially towards the end. It's just the way that this works. And I understand the concept of that you've got a big league catcher, specifically someone who frames well in Jose Trevino. He's a good catcher, right? In comparison to Austin Wells and what he does with the bat, it's no comparison. It feels like apples to oranges, but reality is that the Yankees, regardless, I don't even know if Trevino was off this roster. I feel like we would see Narvaez. We would see him a couple times a week. That's just the way the Yankees do their business. It's unfortunate, but the Yankees are managed differently. Hate to say it. They just manage things differently than what we did in 2009. It's something we should expect. And now at this point, we just have to pray that in the games where the best player at a certain position is not in the field, specifically Austin Wells and what you see with this defensive run save, you have to hope that that game is not impacted by his absence. And that's a dangerous game.
It is a dangerous game. I want to bring up something real quick before we bring up some other players here. Postseason batting. Okay. Posada in 2009. It appears he didn't miss a game. He played every game in the postseason.
How old was Posada?
38.
So he wasn't 23. He wasn't 24 or 25.
Nope. It appears he played every single game. because he played. So they obviously they didn't go to 7-game series at any point. They didn't go to 7 games. 6 games against Philly, right? 6 games against the Angels in the ALCS,
and they played the Twins.
And the Twins was a 3-game ALDS. They swept them. Posada played every single game at age 38. I've changed my mind. Wells better not sit a damn day. There's not a day Wells should sit. I don't care what analytics show you.
This has been a conditioning from Yankees brass that a 25-year-old catcher cannot deal with the everyday wear and tear of being a catcher. You'll even hear it from Girardi up in the press box. They'll sit there and talk about, yeah, you need a day. We didn't need a day in 2017. We didn't need a day in 2009. So why is it that
analyzing the analytics?
Yeah, obviously you can stay more healthy and more fresh if you just don't show up to the yard. I think we all understand this basic concept. If you don't show up to work, you are going to enjoy your day a little bit better. We get that. But this is baseball, and the time to rest is during winter meetings and during the off season. You can go to Aspen, you can go skiing and snowboarding. Enjoy your time. But the time to spend in a Yankees jumpsuit and a Yankees hoodie is not during game 3 of the AL, the division series. It's just not. So I understand Aaron Boone's trying to protect these players. I'm trying to look at it from his perspective. I really am. But his perspective has failed us.
I will. All right. I'll be livid. I've totally changed my, I will be livid if Wells isn't in there. Jonah Heim, who is the catcher for the defending champion. Well, we can't really call them that anymore because they have no chance of making the playoffs. But the champion, World Series champions last year, the Texas Rangers. Jonah Heim played in every single game. Every single game. Every single postseason game, their catcher was in there. Period.
You know what people will say as the rebuttal? They say, well, how did they defend their championship? Were they beat coming into the next year? And what did I tell you, Jake? Our goal is to win once and be done.
Yeah.
Then you worry about winning again. If you haven't won in 14 years, you don't get to tell me about, well, how does this help us? If we do it this way, what's left of us next year? Oh, no. Not in a win now year. In a win now season, you burn out Austin Wells and you play him every single day. If he needs a late start in spring training next year, if you need to get him off his feet and have him in the back half of spring training, get him off his feet, DH him, you do what you have to do. That's in the name of winning a World Series in 2024. But don't tell me that you're going to throw Jose Trevino in there to face a Zach Wheeler in a World Series title game. And suddenly I'm watching that because you're worried that a 25-year-old isn't going to be fresh enough to perform in game 5 through 7 of a series. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get to these other players, but it's very clear here. You've got to go with the hot hand, which we heard in our mailbag. It's clear. Hot hand, play the players. If they're healthy, they'll be fine.
I agree completely. By the way, Jorge Posada played 111 games in 2009. Austin Wells has played 108. So one was 38 years old. One is 24, 25. Really shouldn't be much of a discussion there. We'll skip Anthony Rizzo. I think he's going to make this team. We're not going to really talk about him defensively. He didn't play enough for us to really talk about him. Lately, he's been much better, I will say. We'll give him credit there. Oswaldo Cabrera, not going to really, talk too much about him, nor are we with Gleyber Torres, because we can sit here and say, yeah, his defensive runs saved are terrible. He's got a bunch of errors. The guy has been making it happen with the bat, and you have to have one or the other. And I'll say this before we move on to Volpe, and this is a discussion here. With Anthony Volpe, or not with Anthony Volpe, with Gleyber Torres, you can't tell me at the deadline, because you and I have talked about this, and we were for it, regardless. You can't tell me at the deadline you wanted Jonathan India, but you're going to draw the line now that Gleyber's hitting well. You're going to say his defense is the issue. Because Jonathan India is not a good defender at all. And you were totally fine bringing him in with a good bat. Well, guess what? You had an argument because around that time, you and I were talking about it to an MLB insiders like, hey, is Gleyber going to be on this team? Are they? And then, we had some MLB insiders say they're not very high on him. Well, he completely changed his whole approach not long after that. They stuck by him in a contract year. They could have traded him away. And Glaber has really helped the Yankees. He's become one of the best leadoff hitters in baseball. I don't care about his glove. Be honest with you, I think he has a lot of big-time plays that go unnoticed because he's always picked on for his errors. He's got 18. No one says a lick about Anthony Volpe's errors because he makes big-time plays. He plays shortstop, and he was anointed as Derek Jeter 2.0. Well, here's the thing, Gary. Plus 15 runs saved, defensive runs saved in 2023, right? Gold Glove, great year defensively. Horrible year at the bat, great year defensively. Mm-hmm. But now you fast forward to 2024. He's got that reputation. We just talked about this with Trevino at the Platinum Glove. How many of you realize that he has a plus 4 runs saved? Plus 4. He had 15 last year. Plus 4 is marginally better than Oswaldo Cabrera. And to add on to this, we're really bringing it up yesterday. IKF had a plus 10 the year you thought he was trash at shortstop. Not all of you, because I know a lot of you know baseball. But IKF, and you brought this up off air, you said it best. He was billed to the audience as a stopgap shortstop. Not a guy that you could, it's no different than a quarterback in the NFL where you say, yeah, we're going to go with Jacoby Brissett. No one's like, oh, I'm going to go out and buy that jersey right away. No. And no one was going to go out and buy number 12 because first off, everybody wears 12. And second, IKF was only going to be on the roster for 2 years, right? That was the assumption. So to your point, Yankee fans instantly were more mad about not having a true heir apparent to Derek Jeter, even Didi Gregorius, who was very good. And because it was IKF, because he didn't pass the test, whatever, he was a Gold Glove third baseman. They thought he'd be better at short. I figured that one out. But he was actually good at short. He made errors, but he had a plus 10 defensive run saved. He was actually good. And people said he was trash.
Yeah, we were counting errors at that point. People were saying, okay, he's made 12 errors. Now, okay, we're in double digits. Now we're at 12. Now we're at 13.
Indeed.
People suddenly were counting errors for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, but they were ignoring the analytics completely. And to which I say, okay, if you want to play it that way, do it that way. But don't show me Anthony Volpe and then tell me he's going to make 15 or 16 errors this year. And you say, well, the analytics point that he's a really good shortstop. No, actually, the analytics say that he's a plus 4. Okay. So you know who else is around there? Dansby Swanson. This is a player that I actually compared Anthony Volpe to. And the reason I did this was because Dansby Swanson is still he's been a pretty decent player in Major League Baseball. He got a big contract, right? And he's probably shown more with his bat than Anthony Volpe has thus far. But I will tell you, Anthony Volpe's ceiling, in my opinion, is to just be serviceable for a good team, right? Serviceable. And right now, as we head into October, we have a player that I think is a little bit more, people have more confidence in him defensively than maybe they should. And that's not being talked about at all. Right now, the narrative is that Anthony Volpe is a wet paper towel offensively. But defensively, he's this wizard. He is an anchor defensively. He's that Brandon Crawford anchor at shortstop that the Giants had in the early 2010s. He is not that right now. He was that last year. So can he return to that? Can he do it in October? Absolutely. He has the physical tools. Obviously, he's a young player. But over the course of the last 6 months we've been covering this team, Anthony Volpe has not been that player defensively. He's been somewhere in between. Now, having said that, when you have a tweener defensively at the most important defensive position, you've got to hit, don't you? Well, if you don't hit, you're now looking at a player that is average or below average. And that is what the Yankees, unfortunately, are looking at. And there's a lot riding on this player to improve between now and game 1 of the ALDS.
Yeah. And by the way, Gunnar Henderson is a 4 defensive runs saved. And you get that bat with it. And Bobby Witt Jr., who was negative 17 early on in his career, is now at 2. So he's improved tremendously. I'm not using this, especially horrible timing if we were going to rip Volpe after that play today, but it's not about ripping him. This is about putting it out there. Defense, we're not saying it matters as much as hitting, because we've said it the whole year. We've said, I'll take hitting over defense. But if you are not performing, which is why we brought up Trevino versus Wells, there's no logical explanation for Trevino be on the field over Wells at any point, because Jonah Heim and Jorge Posada, both World Series champions, they played every single game. Now with Anthony Volpe, we talked about it before, Oswaldo Cabrera being left. He's the odd man out. He's better than Rizzo, but he's not playing first. And he's better than Volpe, but he's not playing short. Now, is Volpe a better defender? Yes. But how much better? And I'm glad we brought this up, because I think, I'm not saying everybody feels this way, but I think it's constantly been kind of flooded, like how good he is. And a lot of the beat writers constantly are like, oh, he's lining up for another Gold Glove. I got to be honest with you, he has not been a Gold Glove fielder this year. He's been very, very good. But compared to last year, when he actually truthfully was a Gold Glove fielder, despite having 17 errors, which is more than IKF ever had, the point I'm making here is that it's not all about the errors. Defensive runs saved, I think, is a very fair way to critique defense. To add on to that, Jason Dominguez doesn't really have much for us to go off of. He's looked bad defensively, but he's hitting now. So if he continues to hit, that's fine. I'll live with that. Alex Verdugo. This guy had a +9 defensive runs saved earlier in the year. Do you know what he has now, Gary?
What's it at?
0. He's
League
even.
Average.
He's even. That's all. So I'm not looking at him like he's this defensive specialist. But hold on, Trent Grisham fans out there, quit fist pumping, because I can see you. Trent Grisham has a -1 defensive run saved. So you have been sold a lie that Volpe is the best shortstop defensively by a mile, because it's not true. I just mentioned Gunnar Henderson, and Bobby Witt Jr. is not that far behind. But you've also been sold a lie about Trent Grisham. Oh, he's this defensive. And sorry, Gary, I know you mentioned as well, this is not at you, but we've been billed that he was this defensive guy and he was going to be big for the postseason. He's worse than Verdugo. So if I can have Verdugo as an offensive, or not offensive, a defensive guy off the bench, despite the fact he's just average, he's not amazing. But if I can have him off the bench or have a guy who's -1, I'm going to take Verdugo, who could also hit better than Grisham. Grisham has that power play. You could argue he could come in and have, a big pinch hit home run, and that's possible. But that's how I look at it. And then you have Juan Soto with a -0.4 WAR and Aaron Judge with a -1 defensive WAR. Guess what? I don't care. Do you know why? Because they hit. But I do think that's something we have to go back to down the road when people try to say, Gary, Jake, Aaron Judge can't play first base. Well, he can't play center field right now either. So at some point or another, we are going to have that discussion. Right now isn't the time for it, but I figured that all should be mentioned when we're trying to decide who's going to make the roster, who's not going to make the roster, the pitching and all that. To be honest with you, Gary, I mean, we kind of talked about this off air as well with the pitchers: Cole, Schmidt, Heel, Nestor, Rodon, Stroman, Holmes, Cousins, Canely, Weaver, Hill, Hamilton. You said lighter if they keep 13. Right. I think they are going to keep Grisham, or it will be Duke Ellis, but I think they're going 14-12, Gary. I do. And the reason they're going to go that route, and I'll tell you right now, is because they have 6 starting pitchers that can cover a lot of innings.
Duke Ellis, in my opinion, is the best direction I think they can go. And in large part because his role, you're not going to touch a bat. We need somebody who's going to run the bases properly. He's not going to get picked off, right? He's going to get a good jump. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to make reads on a ball in the dirt that are proper, okay? The Yankees need these plays. If you win the World Series, regardless of what the Stars do, these plays have to be made. In 2004, if the Yankees are playing the Red Sox and Dave Roberts isn't stealing and safe by a shoelace, the Boston Red Sox still lose despite everything that they did, right? So the little guys do matter. And I know it's insane to think, oh, Duke Ellis is going to make an impact in October. But if he ends up on this roster, he has a role. Everybody's on the roster in an emergency. In this situation, you are playing. Nobody's on the roster by accident, except for probably Mark Leiter Jr. But everybody else is there because if a specific situation pops up, the manager's going to turn and say, this is why we got you. That's why we have you. And Dave Roberts knew, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but weeks ahead of time, if this situation arises, this is going to be my moment. So all of a sudden you see a guy reach first base and you say, oh, I can see myself coming into this game. That way he's prepared. Duke Ellis has been preparing the whole season for a moment like that. So completely agree with you. I think the Yankees can get more athletic on their bench. We're not talking about guys who can hit balls in the gap and run out of triple. We're talking about if Giancarlo Stanton hits a flare single with 2 outs and in the 9th inning and the Yankees have no way of getting into scoring position, you can pinch run him, throw Duke Ellis at first base, find your way into second base, and now you're talking about a huge at-bat with runners in scoring position. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I believe Duke Ellis is going to find his way on the postseason roster. Obviously, we have no insider information, but I'm all for that.
Yeah, I think they should keep 14, and I think I would take Duke Ellis over Trent Grisham. I would. I mean, it's tough keeping off that potential power bat, in the pinch hit role, but I think Duke Ellis, it's more from a maturity standpoint. When you watch a lot of baseball, you realize, and Gary, we've watched plenty of World Series. We've watched plenty of postseason games. We know how it's won. We keep bringing up Dave Roberts. That's a bad memory for you, for me, for your dad. That's not good memory.
We just talked about it yesterday. We literally were just talking about it.
But, you can learn from those. You can learn from those mistakes, even to this day. So, Duke Ellis, having him, John Birdie, Oswaldo Cabrera off the bench as some speedsters that can add some athleticism on the base paths. You already have guys in your current lineup with Volpe and, of course, Jazz. Jason Dominguez, he's stealing bases. Now, all of a sudden, Wells, he runs really well for a catcher. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at a dangerous team, even, because you have guys that can steal, guys that can get in a scoring position, guys that are smart, conscientious, and yeah, I think that's the direction they got to go into. And what's funny about the show is this easily could have been a 30-minute show. And I think just as we go along, we just find different things like, oh, yeah, we didn't talk about this, or we could talk about this. And yeah, Duke Ellis is one of those guys that I just found looking for something completely different, by the way. Completely different.
It's never 30 minutes. Never.
No. But, well, it's been in the past. But look, you guys enjoyed it. We know you did. So be sure to smash that like button. Not too hard. Don't break your space bar or whatever the hell. However the hell you slam that thumbs up button. But be sure to do that. Subscribe. Follow us on our socials. Check us out on podcasts. Join our Discord. Become a member if you want. All that good stuff. We appreciate you guys. And before we go, Gary has a movie recommendation. Oh, no. Well, yeah. Okay. We're still doing the
I'm not flipping you off here. This is my ring finger. We're going Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
Because the Yankees have to win a ring. Put up or shut up time.
I like it. So Lord of the Rings. Which one? Just Lord of the Rings?
Just Lord of the Rings, yeah.
So the Fellowship of the Ring. If you want to put Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, or Lord of the Rings 1, God, that sounds weird. Either one, that'll work. That's going to do it. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Like this video.